Ellen Carter's eyes snapped open, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The familiar scent of lavender from her childhood bedroom in Seattle, Washington, flooded her senses. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting golden rays across the hardwood floor, illuminating posters of indie bands and a cluttered desk piled with textbooks. She blinked, disoriented, her mind racing to catch up with her surroundings. Was this real? The air felt crisp, alive, unlike the sterile hospital room she'd last known in 2025. A warm and teasing voice broke through her haze, pulling her entirely into the moment. Ellen, your college graduation is in 5 days. Vince and I have a surprise planned for you, Eric, her older brother leaned against the doorframe. His broad shoulders relaxed, his grin boyish. His legs, strong, steady, supported him effortlessly, a sight that sent a jolt through Ellen's core. No wheelchair, no limp, just Eric whole and unharmed as he'd been before the accident that shattered their lives. Her breath caught and tears welled in her eyes. She'd done it. Her time machine, a prototype born from years of obsessive research at her Seattle-based tech startup, had worked. Ellen lunged from the bed, throwing her arms around Eric, her voice trembling. It worked, Eric. It worked. Her words spilled out raw and unsteady as she clung to him, her fingers digging into his flannel shirt. The warmth of his embrace, the solid reality of his healthy frame grounded her in this second chance. She was back June 2015, 5 days before her University of Washington graduation, before the tragedy that would claim Eric's mobility and bind her to a decade of heartbreak. Eric froze, then chuckled, patting her back with a mix of confusion and affection. Whoa, you were fine a second ago. What's got you acting like a kid again, Elle? Like her own? His hazel eyes sparkled with concern, but there was no trace of the pain she'd seen in them for years in her original timeline. Before she could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway, Vince Harper. His dark hair tousled his smile, radiating the effortless charm that had once captivated her. What's this Ellen turning into a clingy little sister again? He teased, his voice light, his presence filling the room with a warmth that now felt like a lie. At 23, Vince was the picture of a college senior, confident, charismatic, the kind of guy who turned heads at every frat party. But Ellen knew the truth behind that smile, the betrayal that would unfold in the years. Her stomach twisted, and she slowly released Eric, stepping back to steady herself. The Vince of 2025 was cold, calculating, a man who'd used her love and her family's wealth to climb the corporate ladder while hiding a secret life with another woman. But this Vince, the one standing before her, still wore the mask of a caring friend, the big brother who'd reeled her in with ambiguous affection. She forced a smile, her heart icing over. Just excited about graduation, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Eric raised an eyebrow, sensing something off, but Vince laughed, stepping closer. Excited, huh? Well, you should be. This surprise is going to blow you away. His hand reached out instinctively as if to ruffle her hair, a gesture that had once made her heart flutter. Now it made her skin crawl. She tilted her head, dodging his touch, and his hand hung in the air, his smile faltering. A flicker of hurt crossed his green eyes, but Ellen didn't care. She wouldn't fall for his act again. The room fell quiet, the tension palpable. Eric glanced between them, his brows furrowing. Ellen had been Vince's shadow in her past life, her world orbiting around him. She'd followed him to the University of Washington, joined the same business club, even begged her parents to invest in his fledgling startup, all because she thought he loved her. But now, armed with the knowledge of his betrayal, she saw him for what he was, a manipulator who'd kept her close for her family's connections, while his heart belonged to Jane Miller. Ellen took a deep breath, grounding herself in her mission. Her time machine, a sleek device hidden in her lab, had been a gamble. Years of sleepless nights fueled by grief over Eric's accident and Vince's betrayal had led her to quantum physics. The prototype, powered by an unstable quantum core, had sent her back exactly 10 years to June 10, 2015. But there was a catch: the core's energy would destabilize in 5 days, pulling her back to 2025 whether she succeeded. If she altered the timeline too drastically, the consequences could be unpredictable, even catastrophic. She had to be precise, save Eric from the car accident, expose Vince's true nature, and free herself from his grip without fracturing reality. As she stood there, her mind raced with plans. The graduation ceremony was her chance. Vince had thrown her a romantic party in her past life, his gestures blurring the line between friendship and love, trapping her in a net of false hope. She'd written him a heartfelt letter, pouring out her feelings, only for him to call her too young while keeping her close, never setting boundaries. This time, she'd turn the tables. She'd expose him, protect Eric, and rewrite her future. Eric broke the silence, slinging an arm around her shoulders. Come on, let's grab breakfast. You look like you need coffee. He shot Vince a playful glare. And you stop hogging my sister. She's got enough on her plate with finals. Vince laughed, but his eyes lingered on Ellen, searching for the adoration he was used to. He wouldn't find it. As they headed out, Ellen glanced at her phone, a habit from her future life. She imagined sharing this moment with an audience, her story resonating with others who'd faced betrayal or fought for a second chance. If you're rooting for me to take back my life, hit that like button, drop a comment about your own comeback stories, and subscribe to follow this journey, she thought, picturing a YouTube channel where she could inspire others. The idea made her smile. She was no longer just a victim, but a storyteller, ready to shape her narrative and theirs. With Eric's laughter in her ears and Vince's fading charm behind her, Ellen stepped into the Seattle morning, her heart set on rewriting destiny. Ellen sat on the edge of her dorm bed, the Seattle skyline visible through her window, the Space Needle piercing the dusk. The city hummed with life students laughing on the quad cars, weaving through Capitol Hill. But inside her mind was trapped in 2025, replaying the wreckage of her past life. The memories flooded back sharp and unyielding, each one a reminder of why she'd risked everything to return to this moment. In her original timeline, Ellen had married Vince Harper in 2018, 3 years after graduation. She'd been 24, starry-eyed, believing his gentle smiles and late-night talks meant love. Her family, the Carters, owned a thriving tech conglomerate in Seattle, and Ellen, a brilliant coder, had leveraged their wealth to fund Vince's startup Harper Innovations. She thought they were building a future together, a partnership of equals. But 5 years into their marriage, everything unraveled. It started with a car accident in 2023. Business rivals, jealous of Harper Innovations' rapid growth, sabotaged Vince's car. Eric, visiting Vince's office, was in the passenger seat. In a split-second decision, Eric shielded Vince, taking the brunt of the crash. The result was devastating. Eric's spine was severed, confining him to a wheelchair at 27. He brushed it off with a weak smile, telling Ellen, "It's just my legs. You're happy with Vince, that's what matters." But his sacrifice broke her heart, and the storms that followed worsened. Vince's betrayal surfaced slowly, like poison seeping into a wound. A private investigator hired after Ellen noticed his late-night absences sent her a photo, Vince, Jane Miller, and their toddler laughing in a park. Jane, a marketing major Ellen vaguely remembered from college, was Vince's true love. He'd been with her since their university days, hiding a child while married to Ellen. The final blow came one drunken night, when Vince confessed to his friends that Ellen was like a sister to me. Our marriage is just business, her family's money got us here. Ellen overheard her world collapsing. She'd begged her parents to approve the marriage, tying Vince's failing startup to their empire, only to be used as a stepping stone. In 2015, Ellen stared at her reflection in the dorm's mirror, her 21-year-old face unmarred by years of pain. The Vince she'd seen that morning wasn't the cold man of 2025, but his younger self, charming, attentive, the Vince who'd made her heart race with every glance. When he'd reached to pat her head, a gesture that once melted her, she'd recoiled, the memory of his betrayal burning too bright. His hurt expression meant nothing now. She saw through his act, how he'd kept her close with ambiguous affection, never committing, constantly manipulating. Ellen's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A text from Eric. "Meet me at the cafe, we need to talk." Her heart skipped. She remembered this moment from her past life. Eric had sensed her obsession with Vince, but never confronted her directly, knowing she'd brush him off. This time she'd listen. She grabbed her jacket, the weight of her mission settling in. Saving Eric meant preventing the accident, which required cutting Vince out of their lives. The accident had been tied to Vince's shady business deals. Eric would be safe without him. At the cafe, a cozy spot near campus with exposed brick walls and the aroma of fresh espresso, Eric waited at a corner table, his expression serious. "Ellen," he said, sliding his phone across the table. "Do you like Vince? Like, really like him? Do you want to be with him?" His directness caught her off guard. Her love for Vince was an open secret in her past life. She'd followed him like a puppy, her every decision shaped by him. Now she met Eric's gaze, her voice firm. "No. He's your friend, so I've always seen him as a brother. Nothing more." Eric exhaled relief, softening his features. "Good," he said, then hesitated, tapping his phone. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this, but look." The screen displayed a photo, Vince, his arm around Jane Miller, kissing her under the dim lights of a frat party. Ellen's breath hitched, not from shock she'd known about Jane, but from the confirmation that their relationship had started this early, even before Vince began stringing her along. The image burned, but it also fueled her resolve. "Thank you, Eric," she said, her voice steady despite the bitterness rising in her chest. "This proves I'm making the right choice." Eric frowned, confused. "Choice?" Ellen leaned forward, her eyes glinting with determination. "In 5 days at the graduation party, I'm giving Vince a surprise. Will you help me?" Eric's concern shifted to a grin, his protective streak kicking in. "Whatever you need, Elle, I've got your back." As they sipped their coffees, Ellen's mind raced. The graduation party was where Vince had reeled her in last time, his romantic gestures pushing her to confess her love. This time she'd use that stage to expose him pairing him with Jane in front of everyone, shattering his facade. But she had to be careful. Her time machine's 5-day limit loomed, and the quantum core's instability meant she couldn't predict what would happen when she returned to 2025. Would her actions save Eric? Would they free her from Vince's shadow? She didn't know, but for the first time she felt in control, ready to rewrite her story and protect the brother who'd given everything for her. Ellen Carter sat alone in her University of Washington dorm room, the Seattle skyline twinkling beyond her window as dusk settled over the city. The hum of distant traffic and the faint chatter of students on the quad below felt surreal, a stark contrast to the sterile lab she'd left behind in 2025. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the small metallic device on her desk, a prototype time machine no larger than a smartphone, its sleek surface etched with quantum circuits. Its faint blue glow pulsed like a heartbeat, a reminder of the ticking clock that governed her second chance. 5 days. That's all she had to rewrite her future, save her brother Eric, and break free from Vince Harper's betrayal. The weight of that deadline pressed against her chest, but so did a spark of determination. She wouldn't waste this opportunity. The time machine was her life's work, born from years of grief and obsession. In 2025, after Eric's paralyzing accident and Vince's devastating betrayal, Ellen had thrown herself into quantum physics at her Seattle tech startup, Carter Innovations. She'd always been a prodigy coding algorithms in high school that caught MIT recruiters' eye, but pain drove her to crack the impossible time travel. The prototype, powered by an unstable quantum core, manipulated temporal fields by bending space-time around a localized energy matrix. She'd tested it in secret, knowing the risks. Quantum entanglement was volatile, and a single miscalculation could trap her in a paradox, or worse, fracture the timeline entirely. When she activated it, the device had ripped her from 2025 to June 10, 2015, 5 days before her college graduation, with one critical limitation: the core's energy would destabilize after 120 hours, pulling her back to her original timeline, whether she succeeded or not. Ellen ran her fingers over the device, its surface cool. The quantum core's instability was her greatest enemy. In her lab notes, she'd calculated that significant changes to the timeline, like preventing Eric's accident or exposing Vince's duplicity, could create ripples, altering events in unpredictable ways. If she pushed too hard, she might save Eric but lose something else, like her company or relationships. Worse, the core's collapse could strand her in a corrupted timeline, a reality where nothing made sense. She shivered, pushing the thought away. Focus. She had to focus. Her goals were clear: protect Eric from the car accident tied to Vince's shady business deals, expose Vince's relationship with Jane Miller, and reclaim her life from his manipulative grip. Every step had to be precise, every moment calculated. Her mind drifted to the graduation party, the pivotal moment from her past life. In 2015, Vince had thrown her a lavish romantic bash at a Seattle waterfront venue, his gestures blurring the line between friendship and love. He'd danced with her, his hands lingering, his smiles warm, feeding her teenage infatuation. She'd poured her heart into a letter confessing her love, only for him to call her too young, while keeping her close, never setting boundaries. That ambiguity had trapped her, binding her to a decade of pain. This time she'd turned that party into her stage, exposing Vince's true nature in front of everyone, pairing him with Jane and shattering his carefully crafted facade. It was risky. Humiliating Vince publicly could escalate his desperation, but it was the only way to ensure he'd never manipulate her again. Ellen stood pacing the small room, her sneakers scuffing the worn carpet. The dorm was a time capsule: textbooks on business analytics, a faded Huskies pennant, a photo of her and Eric at Pike Place Market, laughing over fish-throwing vendors. She paused at the photo, her chest tightening. Eric's sacrifice in 2023, shielding Vince from that car crash, had cost him his legs. He'd brushed it off, saying her happiness with Vince was worth it, but she'd failed him, tying their family to a man who'd used them. Now, seeing Eric healthy, joking, whole, she felt a surge of resolve. She'd save him no matter the cost. Her phone buzzed a text from Vince. "Can't wait for the surprise, Elle. You're gonna love it." Her jaw clenched. In her past life, his surprises were bait designed to keep her hooked. His words felt hollow, a reminder of the lies she'd once believed. She didn't reply, instead pulling out her laptop to review her plan. The graduation party was in 5 days, June 15th, 2015. She'd need Eric's help to pull off her counter-surprise, and she'd have to navigate Vince's charm without tipping him off. The quantum cores timer ticked in her mind, 120 hours. Then she'd be yanked back to 2025. Would Eric be safe? Would she be free? She didn't know, but the fire in her gut told her she'd fight until the last second. As she closed her laptop, the city lights flickered outside Seattle's skyline, a canvas of possibility. Ellen took a deep breath, her reflection in the window showing a woman no longer defined by Vince's shadow. She was a scientist, a sister, a survivor. 5 days to change everything. She'd make them count. Ellen pushed through the glass door of the Daily Grind, a cozy cafe near the University of Washington campus, the aroma of roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries enveloping her. The Seattle morning was crisp, with students bustling along University Way backpacks, slung over their shoulders, their laughter mingling with the hum of espresso machines. She spotted Eric at a corner table, his flannel shirt rolled up at the sleeves, his hazel eyes scanning his phone with a furrowed brow. The sight of him, healthy, mobile, free of the wheelchair that haunted her memories, sent a pang through her heart. In 2023, Eric had lost everything to protect Vince, and Ellen had lost him to years of pain. Not this time. "Hey, Elle," Eric called, waving her over, his grin fading as he studied her face. "You okay? You've been different since yesterday." He set his phone down, leaning forward, his protective instincts fully displayed. Ellen slid into the seat across from him, the warmth of her latte grounding her. Eric had always been her rock, the big brother who'd taught her to code, snuck her into concerts, and stood by her, even when she'd been blind to Vince's true nature. Her obsession with Vince had pushed Eric to the sidelines in her past life, but his love never wavered. Now she'd make it right. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile, but her voice betrayed a tremor. Eric's eyes narrowed. He knew her too well and could read the shift in her demeanor, the way she'd dodged Vince's touch, the coldness in her usually warm gaze. "Ellen," he said, his tone cautious but firm. "What's going on with you and Vince? You used to follow him around like he hung the moon. Now you're acting like he's a stranger." His words hit hard, a reminder of the girl she'd been, naive, lovesick, blind to Vince's manipulation. Ellen took a sip of her latte, the bitterness mirroring her mood. In her past life, she had been Vince's shadow, joining the business club because he was president, choosing UW because he did, even convincing her parents to fund his startup. She'd thought his late-night study sessions, his teasing smiles meant love. But in 2025, she'd learned the truth. Vince had a child with Jane Miller, his true love, and saw Ellen as a business asset, a little sister to string along for her family's wealth. The memory of his drunken confession, "Our marriage is just business," still burned, as did the image of him with Jane and their child laughing while Ellen's world crumbled. She met Eric's gaze, her resolve hardening. "I don't like Vince that way," she said, her voice steady. "He's your friend, so I've always seen him as a brother. Nothing more." The lie was necessary. She couldn't tell Eric about her time travel. His eyes widened, relief flickering across his face, but also confusion. "Seriously? Everyone thought you were head over heels." "I mean, you used to light up when he walked in." Ellen's chest tightened. He wasn't wrong. At 15, she'd fallen for Vince, the charming senior who'd helped her with math homework, who'd called her Elle with a smile that felt like sunlight. By 21, she'd built her world around him, blind to his ambiguity. Now, at 31, in her mind, she saw him for what he was, a user who'd kept her close for her family's connections while loving Jane. "Things change," she said softly. "I've grown up." Eric leaned back, studying her, then pulled out his phone. "Okay, but I need to show you something. I wasn't sure if I should, but you deserve to know." He slid the phone across the table, the screen displaying a photo that caught Ellen's breath. Vince, his dark hair unmistakable, was kissing Jane Miller under the dim lights of a frat party, their arms entwined, matching bracelets glinting on their wrists. The image was a knife to her heart, not because it surprised her, but because it confirmed how early Vince's betrayal began. In 2015, while he was charming Ellen, he was already with Jane. Her hands shook, but she forced a calm smile, the scientist in her taking over. "Thanks for showing me Eric," she said, her voice steady despite the bitterness. "This proves I'm making the right choice." Eric frowned, his protective streak flaring. "Choice? What are you planning?" "Elle?" She leaned forward, her eyes glinting with determination. "At the graduation party, I'm giving Vince a surprise, something he won't see coming. Will you help me?" Eric's concern melted into a grin, his loyalty unwavering. "You know I've got your back." "What's the plan?" Ellen took a deep breath, her mind racing. The graduation party set for June 15th at a waterfront venue was where Vince had reeled her in last time, his romantic gestures pushing her to confess her love. This time she'd use that stage to expose his relationship with Jane, humiliating him publicly and severing his hold on her. It was a gamble Vince's desperation could escalate, but she felt unstoppable with Eric by her side. As they hashed out details over coffee, the cafe's warmth wrapping around them, Ellen felt a flicker of hope. The Quantum Core's 5-day limit loomed, but she had Eric's support and a plan. She'd protect him, expose Vince, and reclaim her life no matter what it took. The Seattle morning stretched before her, vibrant and full of possibility, and for the first time in years, Ellen felt like she was in control of her own story. Ellen Carter stepped into the airy elegance of Bella's boutique in downtown Seattle, the soft chime of the doorbell mingling with the rustle of silk and satin. The store, nestled among the chic storefronts of Pike Street, was a haven of sparkling chandeliers and racks of graduation gowns, their colors catching the late morning light streaming through tall windows. Ellen's fingers grazed a navy dress, her mind only half on the task. Her focus was elsewhere, on the graduation party 3 days away, where she'd expose Vince Harper's duplicity and free herself from his shadow. The quantum core in her time machine, hidden in her dorm, ticked down relentlessly. 3 days left to save her brother Eric, to rewrite her future, to end a decade of pain. She moved deeper into the boutique, her sneakers silent on the polished wood floor, when a familiar voice cut through the air. "Jane, this emerald is perfect. It'll make your eyes pop." Ellen froze, her heart lurching. Vince Harper stood across the store, holding a shimmering green gown, his dark hair catching the light as he smiled at Jane Miller. Jane, petite and radiant, clung to his arm, her laughter soft and intimate. Their matching silver bracelets gleamed, a subtle but undeniable mark of their bond. Ellen's chest tightened, not from jealousy, but from the confirmation of Vince's betrayal already in motion in 2015, long before he'd strung her with false promises. This exact moment at Bella's had gutted her in her past life. She'd stumbled upon Vince and Jane, their closeness piercing her heart. That night, Vince had sought her out, spinning a flimsy excuse about helping Jane at his mother's request, claiming their families were close. Ellen, naive and lovesick, had believed him, letting his charm blind her to the truth. Now, armed with the knowledge of his future, his secret child with Jane, his cold confession that Ellen was just business, she felt only resolve. She wouldn't let him manipulate her again. Vince's eyes caught hers across the racks, and his smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his handsome face. He straightened, guiding Jane toward Ellen with a practiced ease. "Ellen." "Hey, fancy running into you here," he said, his voice warm but laced with a subtle tension. "This is Jane Miller, a junior in my business program. She's graduating this year, too." Jane's smile was sweet, almost too perfect, as she extended a hand. "Hi, Ellen. Nice to meet you." Ellen shook her hand, her expression calm and detached. "Nice to meet you too, Jane," she said, her tone polite but calm, her hazel eyes scanning the couple. The bracelets, identical to their engraved patterns, confirmed what Eric's photo had already shown. Vince and Jane were together, their relationship no secret to anyone but the old Ellen. She felt a pang, not for Vince, but for the girl she'd been so eager to please, so blind to his games. Vince shifted, his charm kicking back in and picking out a dress for the big day. "Let me help you find something." His offer was casual, but his eyes searched hers, expecting the adoration he was used to. Ellen's lips curved into a faint smile, her voice steady. "No need, Vince. You should focus on helping Jane. I've got plans with someone else." She nodded toward Jane, whose smile tightened, her fingers tightening on Vince's arm. "Plans?" Vince's brow furrowed, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. With who, Ellen didn't answer, letting the silence hang. Jane's eyes darted between them, her sweetness giving way to a flash of irritation. Before Vince could press further, Ellen turned, pretending to study a sapphire gown, her heart steady. She'd planted the first seed of doubt, a small but deliberate move in her plan to unravel Vince's facade at the graduation party. As she moved toward another rack, Vince stepped closer, his voice lowering. Ellen, don't get the wrong idea. I'm just helping Jane because our moms are friends. The excuse was word for word from her past life, and it took all her restraint not to laugh. She met his gaze, her expression indifferent. It's fine, Vince. It's normal for you to shop with your junior. Enjoy your time. Her words were a blade, sharp and precise, cutting through his charm. Jane's face soured, and she tugged at Vince's sleeve, her voice petulant. Vince, let's look at the other dresses. But Vince didn't move. His eyes locked on Ellen, and confusion and panic flickered in them. Ellen turned away, her heart pounding with triumph and resolve. She'd rattled him, and it felt good 3 days until the party, 3 days until she'd expose him for good. The quantum core's timer ticked in her mind, but she pushed it aside. She was in control now, and Vince Harper was about to learn what it meant to lose her. Ellen stood by a rack of sequined gowns in Bella's boutique, the soft hum of Seattle's Pike Street traffic filtering through the store's windows. Her encounter with Vince and Jane had left her pulse racing, not from pain, but from the thrill of taking back her power. She'd seen the crack in Vince's confidence, the way her indifference had shaken him, and it fueled her resolve. 3 days remained before the graduation party, where she'd expose Vince's relationship with Jane and sever his hold on her life. The quantum core in her time machine, hidden in her dorm, was counting down 72 hours until it pulled her back to 2025. She had to stay focused, protect Eric, and rewrite her future, no matter the cost. A shadow fell across the rack, and a deep, steady voice broke her thoughts. Ellen, sorry I'm late. Work held me up. She turned to see Ryan Quinn striding toward her, his tailored black suit accentuating his tall, lean frame. His dark hair was neatly combed, his blue eyes warm with a quiet confidence that felt like a balm after Vince's calculated charm. Ryan, her arranged fiancé from a long-standing Carter Quinn family business alliance, carried a small, elegantly wrapped box from her favorite Seattle bakery. Tiramisu, he said with a smile, handing it to her. To make up for the delay. Ellen's heart lifted, a genuine smile breaking through her guarded exterior. You didn't have to, Ryan, she said, taking the box, her fingers brushing his. She'd barely known Ryan in her past life, dismissing their engagement to chase Vince. She'd begged both families to cancel it, and Ryan had quietly stepped aside, moving to London, leaving only a faint memory of his kindness. Now, seeing him in 2015, she felt a pang of guilt and something new, a warmth she hadn't expected. Across the store, Vince's eyes burned into them, his posture stiffening as he watched Ryan. Jane clung to his arm, her expression souring. Ellen seized the moment, linking her arm with Ryan's. Vince, Jane, this is Ryan Quinn, she said, her voice clear and calm, my fiancé. We're spending the day together. The word fiancé hit like a thunderbolt. Vince's face paled, his green eyes wide with disbelief. Jane's grip on his arm tightened, her smile vanishing. Sensing the tension, Ryan stepped closer to Ellen, his presence a quiet shield. Is there a problem, Mr. Harper? He asked, his tone polite but edged with steel. Vince's jaw clenched, his voice low and strained. Fiancé. That's not possible, Ellen. You were supposed to be... He trailed off, his words catching as if he'd revealed too much. Ellen's pulse quickened. Did Vince know about her time travel? Had he somehow sensed the original timeline where she'd chosen him? She dismissed the thought, keeping her composure. Ryan and I are engaged, she said firmly. It's been arranged for years. Vince's eyes darted between them, confused and desperation flickering across his face. You're joking, he pressed, stepping forward, ignoring Jane's tug on his sleeve. Ryan's hand rested lightly on Ellen's shoulder, his voice cold. Ellen's made her choice clear, Mr. Harper. I suggest you respect it. The authority in his tone silenced Vince, who stumbled back, his charm crumbling. Flushed with anger, Jane stomped out of the boutique, her heels clicking furiously. Vince didn't follow, his gaze locked on Ellen as if willing her to return it. Ellen met his eyes unflinching. Enjoy your day, Vince, she said, her tone final. She turned to Ryan, who offered a gentle smile. Ready to pick out that dress? He asked, guiding her away. As they moved to another rack, Ellen felt Vince's stare boring into her back, but she didn't look back. The power dynamic had shifted, and she was no longer his puppet. Ryan set down the tiramisu box at a quiet corner of the boutique, his expression softening. You okay? He asked, his blue eyes searching hers. Ellen nodded, but her guard lowered the weight of her mission, pressing in. Ryan, there's something I need to tell you, she said, her voice low. She couldn't reveal the time travel, but she needed him to understand her stakes. In another life, I made mistakes. I trusted Vince, and it cost me everything. My brother, he got hurt because of him. I can't let that happen again. Ryan listened, his calm demeanor unwavering, but a flicker of pain crossed his eyes. I know about the engagement, he said quietly. Back then you chose Vince. I didn't fight it, I thought it was what you wanted. But I always wondered what could have been. His honesty caught her off guard, stirring a warmth she hadn't felt in years. I'm not here to push you, Ellen, he continued. I want you to know I'm on your side, whatever you face. Ellen's throat tightened. In her past life, she'd overlooked Ryan, blinded by Vince's flash. Now his steady presence felt like a harbor safe and grounding. Thank you, Ryan, she said, her voice soft. I don't know what's next, but I'm glad you're here. He smiled, a quiet relief in his eyes. Let's find you that dress, he said, steering her toward a rack of shimmering gowns. As they browsed, Ellen felt a shift. She wasn't just fighting for Eric or against Vince. She was discovering a new path, one where she could be herself, supported by someone who saw her worth. The graduation party loomed, but she felt ready to face it with Ryan by her side. Ellen Carter sat in the passenger seat of Ryan Quinn's sleek black sedan, the Seattle skyline blurring past as they drove along the waterfront, the Puget Sound glinting under the late afternoon sun. The encounter at Bella's boutique with Vince Harper and Jane Miller lingered in her mind, but its weight felt lighter with Ryan beside her. His steady, unassuming, yet quietly commanding presence contrasted sharply with Vince's calculated charm. The tiramisu box from her favorite bakery rested on her lap, a small gesture that warmed her more than she expected. With only 3 days left before the quantum core in her time machine pulled her back to 2025, Ellen felt the urgency of her mission: save her brother Eric from the accident that would paralyze him, expose Vince's betrayal, and reclaim her life. But Ryan's arrival had stirred something new, a flicker of hope she hadn't anticipated. The car's interior was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine and the distant cry of seagulls. Ryan's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, his tailored suit jacket slightly rumpled from their time at the boutique. Ellen glanced at him, his sharp jawline softened by the golden light filtering through the window. She'd barely known Ryan in her past life, dismissing their arranged engagement to chase Vince. She'd begged her parents and the Quinns to cancel it, and Ryan had stepped aside without a fight, moving to London, leaving only a faint memory of his kindness. Now in 2015, his support felt like a lifeline, but also a challenge. Could she open her heart after years of pain, Ryan, she said, breaking the silence, her voice low but steady. There's something I need to tell you. She couldn't reveal the time travel, not yet, not without risking his trust or the timeline's stability. But she needed him to understand her stakes and why she was pulling away from Vince. I've made mistakes before and trusted the wrong person. Vince. He hurt me, and it cost my brother everything. I can't let that happen again. Ryan's eyes flicked to her, his calm demeanor, unwavering, but a shadow of pain crossed his face. He pulled the car into a quiet parking lot overlooking the Sound, the water stretching endlessly before them. Turning to face her, he set the tiramisu box aside, his movements deliberate. Ellen, he said, his voice soft but weighted. I know more than you think. In another version of this, you chose Vince. Our families had us engaged since we were kids, a Carter-Quinn alliance to merge our tech empires. But you loved him, and I didn't fight it. I thought it was what you wanted. Ellen's breath caught her heart twisting with guilt. In her past life, she'd been so blinded by Vince that she'd ignored Ryan's quiet devotion. You moved to London, she whispered, piecing together fragments from 2025. After I canceled our engagement. Ryan nodded, his blue eyes meeting hers with a vulnerability she hadn't expected. I did. I started a firm there and kept my distance. But I always wondered what could have been. When I heard you were back at UW single, I came back to Seattle. Not to push you, but to be here in case you needed someone. His words hit like a wave, stirring a warmth she hadn't felt in years. In her past life, Vince's affection had been a trap, a net of ambiguity that kept her tethered. Ryan's honesty was different, open, unguarded, offering support without demands. I'm not here to chain you, Ellen, he continued, his voice steady. I know you're fighting something bigger than I understand, but I'm on your side whatever you're facing if you'll let me. Ellen's throat tightened, her eyes stinging. She'd poured her heart into Vince for 10 years, only to be used. Ryan's simple, sincere offer felt like a harbor after a storm. Thank you, Ryan, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what's next, but I'm glad you're here. She reached out her hand, brushing his, and he stiffened slightly, a faint flush coloring his ears. He smiled, a quiet relief in his eyes. He said, Let's get you that dress. He started the car again, something to make Vince regret ever crossing you. As they drove back toward downtown, Ellen felt a shift. Her mission was still clear, to expose Vince at the graduation party and protect Eric from the accident tied to Vince's shady deals, but Ryan's presence added a new layer. He wasn't just an ally, he was a reminder of what she deserved: respect, trust, a partner who saw her as an equal. The quantum core's timer ticked in her mind, 72 hours until she'd be yanked back to 2025. Could she save Eric and still explore this connection with Ryan? She didn't know, but for the first time she wanted to find out. They spent the afternoon at the boutique, and Ryan patiently offered suggestions as Ellen tried on gowns. His easy humor, teasing her about a poofy tulle dress, praising a sleek sapphire one, made her laugh, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. As they left, the sun dipping low over Seattle, Ellen felt lighter, her resolve sharpened by Ryan's support. The graduation party loomed, but with Ryan by her side, she was ready to face Vince and rewrite her story. Ellen sat cross-legged on her dorm bed, the Seattle night wrapping her room in a soft glow from the city lights outside. Her laptop was open, displaying sketches of her graduation party plan. A carefully orchestrated moment to expose Vince Harper's relationship with Jane Miller and sever his hold on her life. The quantum core in her time machine, hidden in a locked drawer, pulsed faintly, a reminder that only 2 days remained before it pulled her back to 2025. Her mission was clear: protect Eric from the accident that would paralyze him, humiliate Vince publicly, and reclaim her future. But the encounter at Bella's boutique had rattled her, not because of Vince's lies, but because of Ryan Quinn's unexpected warmth, his quiet devotion stirring feelings she wasn't ready to face. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. An unknown number flashed on the screen, followed by a message that made her blood run cold. A photo of a man's hand, a delicate diamond ring glinting on the woman's finger beside it. A small red mole on the man's wrist confirmed it Vince's hand. The caption read, "He loves me, Ellen. He's only nice to you because of your family's money. Jane Miller." Ellen's jaw clenched, but she wasn't surprised. In her past life, Jane had been Vince's shadow partner, the woman he'd chosen while keeping Ellen as a backup. The ring was new, a bold move to stake her claim. Another message followed. "At the graduation party, help me surprise Vince. Make it official between us and I'll back off. You can have him forever. I know he wants you more." Ellen stared at the words, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Jane's desperation was palpable, and her confidence in Vince's love was a delusion Ellen knew too well. In 2025, Jane had stayed with Vince through his rise, raising their child while he used Ellen's family wealth. Now Jane thought she could manipulate Ellen into stepping aside, unaware that Ellen was playing a different game. Ellen typed a reply, her fingers steady. "I believe you, Jane. Let's see what happens at the party." She hit send, her mind racing. Jane's ploy was a gift she'd given Ellen, the perfect opportunity to publicly expose their relationship, turning Vince's romantic gesture into a trap. Ellen leaned back, her eyes drifting to the photo of her and Eric at Pike Place Market pinned to her corkboard. Eric's support at the cafe, his promise to help with her surprise, grounded her. She'd used Jane's arrogance to ensure Vince's downfall, protecting Eric. Vince's behavior shifted over the next 2 days, mirroring the desperate affection Ellen had once shown him. He showed up at her dorm with coffee, sent her flowers, even cooked her a pasta dinner, his green eyes searching for the adoration he was used to. "You're acting different, Elle," he said one evening, his voice laced with unease as they sat in the campus courtyard. "Is it because of Quinn?" Ellen smiled politely, accepting his gifts, but keeping her distance. "Just busy with graduation," she said, her tone neutral. His gestures felt hollow, a mirror of her past devotion, and she saw through them now. Guilt, not love, drove him, spurred by her growing closeness with Ryan. Ellen spent those days with Ryan, finalizing her graduation gown, a sleek sapphire dress that made her feel powerful, and planning her speech. Ryan's presence was a constant, his quiet humor and thoughtful gestures easing the tension of her mission. At a waterfront cafe, he shared more about himself, his childhood coding apps in his parents' garage, his dream to build a tech firm that rivaled her family's, his regret for not fighting for their engagement in her past life. "I saw how you looked at Vince," he admitted, his voice soft. "I didn't want to be the guy who forced you into something." Ellen's heart ached. She'd overlooked a man who valued her, chasing one who didn't. "I was wrong back then," she said, meeting his eyes. "I'm seeing things clearly now." As the graduation party loomed, Ellen felt the quantum core's timer pressing closer, 48 hours left. Jane's messages continued, each one more insistent. "You'll see Ellen. Vince is mine." Ellen ignored them, focusing on the party. She and Eric coordinated details, lighting cues, a spotlight to highlight Jane, a speech to frame Vince as the devoted boyfriend he pretended not to be. Ryan offered to stand by her, his presence a quiet promise of support. Ellen looked out at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle a beacon in the dark. Jane's ploy had given her an opening, but Ryan's faith and Eric's loyalty gave her strength. The party would be her moment to rewrite her story, to bury Vince's lies, and to step into a future she controlled. The Seattle waterfront glowed under the June evening sky, the Puget Sound reflecting the last hues of sunset as Ellen Carter stepped into the grand ballroom of the Edgewater Hotel. The venue, booked by her brother Eric for her University of Washington graduation party, shimmered with elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over tables draped in white linen, and a string quartet filled the air with delicate melodies. Ellen's sapphire gown hugged her frame, its subtle shimmer accentuating her determined stride. Her heart pounded not with nerves, but with purpose. Tonight, June 15, 2015, was her moment to expose Vince Harper's duplicity, protect Eric from the accident that would paralyze him in her original timeline, and reclaim her life. The quantum core in her time machine, hidden back in her dorm, ticked down. Only 24 hours remained before it yanked her back to 2025. The ballroom buzzed with classmates, professors, and family friends, their laughter mingling with the clink of champagne glasses. Ellen scanned the crowd, spotting Eric near the bar, his flannel shirt traded for a sharp navy suit, his hazel eyes scanning the room protectively. Ryan Quinn, her arranged fiancé, stood nearby, his tailored black suit exuding quiet confidence. His presence grounded her, a reminder of her new path. Vince Harper, however, was the center of attention, charming a group of business majors with his easy grin. His deep charcoal suit matched her gown perfectly, a detail he'd planned no doubt to stage his romantic gesture. In her past life, this party had been her downfall, his ambiguous affection, pushing her to confess her love only for him to call her too young while keeping her tethered. Tonight, she'd turn his trap against him. Ellen caught Eric's eye, and he gave a subtle nod, confirming their plan was in place. They'd coordinated with the event staff, lighting cues, a spotlight a moment, to shift the narrative. Jane Miller's messages over the past 2 days, insisting Vince loved her, and proposing a surprise to make their relationship official, had given Ellen the perfect opening. Jane stood across the room, her emerald gown striking against her fair skin, her eyes darting nervously to Vince. Her matching bracelet gleamed, symbolizing the secret Ellen was about to expose. As the quartet transitioned to a slow waltz, Vince approached, a massive bouquet of roses in his hands, his green eyes locked on Ellen. The crowd parted, sensing a moment, and whispers rippled through the room. "Ellen's boyfriend is so romantic," someone murmured. Ellen's lips twitched. She'd let them think that for now. Vince stopped before her, his smile warm but calculated. "Ellen," he said, his voice carrying, "this night's for you." He extended the roses, and the crowd cooed, expecting a fairy tale moment. The lights dimmed, a spotlight pinning Ellen to the center of the room. Vince stepped forward, reaching for her hand, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. She knew what came next in her past life, his gentle rejection, her heartbreak, his continued manipulation. Not this time. Ellen stepped back, her hand brushing his aside, and seized the microphone from the nearby stand. The room fell silent, every eye on her, Vince's smile faltering. Ellen said, "Thank you all for being here," her voice clear and steady, echoing through the ballroom. "And thank you, Vince, for always looking out for me since I was 15. His eyes lit up, expecting a confession, but Ellen's tone shifted, calm and deliberate. "You've been like my brother, helping me get into UW and supporting me through college. And tonight I want to return the favor by celebrating your happiness." She raised her hand, signaling the lighting crew. A second spotlight snapped on, illuminating Jane Miller in the crowd. Gasps rippled through the room as Jane froze, her emerald gown glowing under the light. "I've chosen the perfect partner for Vince," Ellen continued, her voice unwavering. "Jane Miller, his classmate, his match. They're perfect together, aren't they?" She smiled, innocent but sharp, as the crowd turned to Jane, who looked torn between shock and a fleeting glimmer of joy. Vince's face drained of color, his bouquet slipping slightly in his hands. "Ellen, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low but panicked. Ellen tilted her head, her smile unwavering. "Celebrating you and Jane, of course. You've been so discreet, but everyone should know how happy you are." The crowd buzzed, whispers turning to murmurs of realization. "They're together. I thought Vince was with Ellen." Jane's expression shifted, her joy fading as she saw Vince's horror. She stepped forward, reaching for him, but he flinched, his facade crumbling. Ellen returned the microphone to the MC, her heart pounding triumphantly. She'd turned Vince's romantic gesture into a public declaration of his genuine relationship, exposing his duplicity without breaking her composure. The guests' eyes darted between her, Vince and Jane, the air thick with gossip. Ellen stepped back, her sapphire gown catching the light, and felt a weight lift. She'd taken control, and Vince's world was unraveling. The ballroom at the Edgewater Hotel buzzed with tension, the soft strains of the string quartet drowned out by the crowd's murmurs. Ellen Carter stood just outside the spotlight, her sapphire gown shimmering as she watched Vince Harper's carefully crafted charm collapse. His face, pale and taut, betrayed his panic as he clutched the bouquet of roses, now a useless prop. Jane Miller, caught in the second spotlight, hovered near the edge of the crowd, her emerald gown no longer radiant, but a stark contrast to her flushed, uncertain expression. Ellen's public declaration naming Jane Vince's perfect match turned the graduation party into a spectacle, exposing his secret relationship and shattering his romantic facade. With only 24 hours left before the quantum core in her time machine pulled her back to 2025, Ellen felt a surge of triumph, but the night wasn't over. She needed her allies to seal Vince's defeat and protect her brother Eric from the future accident tied to Vince's shady deals. Ryan Quinn stepped forward, his tailored black suit cutting a sharp silhouette as he placed a protective hand on Ellen's shoulder. His blue eyes met hers, steady and reassuring, a silent promise of support. Across the room, Eric Carter moved closer, his navy suit crisp, his hazel eyes flashing with a mix of pride and vigilance. The crowd's whispers grew. Did Vince play her? Ellen deserves better, and Ellen felt the tide turning. In her past life, this party had been her humiliation, Vince's ambiguous affection trapping her in a decade of pain. Now she'd flipped the script, and her allies were ready to back her up. Vince's voice broke the silence, hoarse and desperate. "Ellen, what are you talking about?" He stepped toward her, the roses trembling in his hands. "We're not... Jane and I aren't..." His words faltered as Jane's eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face. Ellen tilted her head, her voice calm but cutting. "Aren't you, Vince? You've been so good to me, like a brother. I want you to be happy with Jane. You two are a match made in heaven." The crowd's murmurs turned to gasps, the truth sinking in. Realizing Vince's hesitation, Jane took a shaky step forward, her voice trembling. "Vince, tell them it's true. You said you loved me." Her words were a plea, but Vince's face twisted, his panic giving way to anger. "Ellen, stop this," he snapped, his voice rising. "You're making a mistake." The room stilled, every eye on the unfolding drama. Ryan's grip on Ellen's shoulder tightened slightly, and he stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. Mr. Harper and Ellen made their stance clear. Respect her choice and move on. He paused, his gaze sweeping to Jane, his tone calm but polite. "And congratulations to you and Miss Miller. I hope you find the happiness you deserve." His words were a masterstroke, framing Vince and Jane as a couple while distancing Ellen, leaving no room for Vince to reclaim her. Jane's face crumpled, her earlier confidence shattered. She tugged at Vince's sleeve, her voice breaking. "Vince, say something." But Vince shoved her hand away, his eyes locked on Ellen, burning with fury and desperation. The crowd's whispers turned harsh. "He's been two-timing Ellen. What a jerk." And Jane's eyes filled with tears. She turned and fled, her heels clicking as she disappeared through a side door, her dreams of a public proposal crushed. Eric stepped forward, positioning himself between Vince and Ellen, his broad frame a barrier. "Vince," he said, his voice steady but laced with warning, "we all know what's going on with you and Jane. If you care about her, be honest. Stop dragging my sister into your mess." His words were a final nail sealing Vince's humiliation. In her past life, Eric had never confronted Vince so directly, his loyalty to Ellen tempered by her blind devotion. In this timeline, he was her shield, his protective streak fiercer than ever. The guests' murmurs grew louder, their disdain palpable. Leeching off the Carters while chasing another girl, someone whispered, "I thought he was devoted to Ellen." Vince's face cycled through colors red with anger, pale with shock, green with humiliation. He opened his mouth, searching for a defense, but nothing came. Ellen met his gaze, her expression serene. "I want you to be happy, Vince," she said, her voice soft but final. "You and Jane deserve each other." Ryan guided Ellen away from the spotlight, his arms steady around her shoulders, a natural gesture of protection. Eric followed, shooting Vince a warning glare that dared him to pursue. Vince stood frozen, the roses drooping in his hands, his eyes dull as the crowd's judgment closed in. Jane's absence left him exposed, the biggest joke of the night. Ellen felt a weight lift her heart lighter than it had been in years. She'd turned Vince's trap into her triumph, and with Ryan and Eric by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. As they reached the lounge area, Eric glanced at her, his voice hesitant. "Ellen, that was incredible. But Vince, he's not going to let this go." Ellen nodded, her gaze steady. "I know, but I'm done letting him control me." Ryan handed her a glass of water, his eyes deep with concern. "You okay?" he asked softly. She smiled, genuine and free. "Better than ever." The quantum core's timer ticked in her mind, one day left. She'd humiliated Vince, but the fight wasn't over. She had to ensure Eric's safety and face the uncertain future awaiting her in 2025. Ellen Carter stood in the doorway of her Seattle apartment, the early morning light casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. The city outside hummed with the quiet pulse of a new day, June 16th, 2015, but inside her heart raced with the weight of her mission. The quantum core in her time machine, hidden in her dorm, was nearing its limit. Less than 24 hours remained before it pulled her back to 2025. Last night's graduation party at the Edgewater Hotel had been a triumph. She'd exposed Vince Harper's relationship with Jane Miller, turning his romantic gesture into a public humiliation and severing his hold on her. But the victory felt fragile, the ticking clock a reminder that she had to ensure her brother Eric's safety from the accident that would paralyze him in her original timeline. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the final steps of her plan. The doorbell rang sharp and insistent, shattering the quiet. Ellen opened the door and her stomach dropped. Vince Harper was a shadow of the charming senior she'd once adored. His dark hair was disheveled, his green eyes bloodshot, dark circles etched beneath them. His suit was rumpled, reeking of whiskey, a stark contrast to the polished image he'd maintained at the University of Washington. "Ellen," he rasped, his voice thick with desperation. "We need to talk. Please." Ellen's grip tightened on the doorframe, her body tensing. In her past life, Vince's charm had kept her tethered for a decade, his ambiguous affection masking his betrayal with Jane and his use of her family's wealth. Now, after her public declaration at the party naming him and Jane as a couple, she saw only a broken man clinging to a narrative she'd dismantled. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice cold and formal. "Is there something you need?" The use of his last name stung him, his face twisting in pain. "Ellen, don't call me that," he said, stepping forward, his hands reaching for her. "What happened to us?" "Everything at the party, it was a misunderstanding. Jane and I aren't what you think." His words were a desperate echo of the excuses he'd fed her in her past life when she'd caught him with Jane at a boutique and believed his lies about family obligations. Now they rang hollow, fueling her resolve. She stepped back, avoiding his touch. "I made myself clear last night," she said, her tone steady. "You and Jane are perfect together. I wish you both happiness. As for me, I have my fiancé Ryan." The mention of Ryan Quinn, her arranged partner whose quiet strength had anchored her through the second chance, was a deliberate jab. Vince's eyes darkened, his hands clenching into fists. "Ryan," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "You're doing this because of him, aren't you? You've loved me for years, Ellen. Since you were 15, you said you'd marry no one but me." His words cut deep, slicing open the wounds of her past devotion. In her original timeline, she'd been that girl following Vince to UW, joining his business club, begging her parents to fund his startup, all because she thought he loved her. He'd known her feelings, exploited them, keeping her close as a little sister while building a life with Jane. Now his entitlement infuriated her. "You're right," she said, her voice like ice. "I did love you, and that was my mistake. Who hasn't fallen for trash when they were young? Vince's face went ashen, his mouth opening in shock. Trash, he repeated as if the word was foreign. Ellen stepped forward, her eyes blazing. You used my love, my family's money while keeping Jane on the side. You treated me like a backup plan, a stepping stone. Did you ever think you deserved me, Vince? Each word was a blade, sharp and deliberate, cutting through years of pain. Vince stammered, scrambling for a defense. It's not like that, Ellen. I was wrong about Jane, but I cared about you. I still do. Cared, Ellen scoffed, her voice rising. You called me a sister while building a family with her. Save your excuses. She turned to close the door, but Vince lunged, slamming his weight against it, his eyes wild. I won't let you leave me, he growled, his hands grabbing her shoulders, his grip bruising. You're mine, Ellen. You've always been mine. Panic flared, but a strong arm yanked Vince back before she could push him off. Ryan Quinn, his tailored suit impeccable despite the early hours, stood between them, his blue eyes cold with fury. Mr. Harper, he said, his voice low and menacing, leave now or I won't be polite. Vince struggled, but Ryan twisted his arm, pinning him to the ground with practiced ease. Let me go, Vince shouted, his voice cracking. Ryan tightened his hold, his tone icy. If you ever touch her again, it won't end this easily. Vince collapsed in a heap, his eyes pleading as he looked up at Ellen. Please, I can explain. But Ellen felt only disgust, the last threads of her past love severed. You brought this on yourself, she said, her voice final. She slammed the door, the sound echoing like a gavel. Vince's muffled shouts faded as Ryan stood beside her, gently touching her shoulder. It's over, he said softly. He won't bother you again. Ellen leaned against the door, her body trembling with relief. The quantum core's timer ticked in her mind, hours left to ensure Eric's safety. Ryan's presence grounded her, his support a reminder that she wasn't alone. Thank you, she whispered, meeting his eyes. He shook his head, his expression soft. You don't need to thank me. I'm here. As the Seattle morning unfolded outside, Ellen felt a weight lift. She'd faced Vince, reclaimed her power, and with Ryan by her side, she was ready for the final hours of her second chance. Ellen's vision blurred, a sudden wave of dizziness washing over her as she stood in her Seattle apartment. The familiar hum of the city outside faded, replaced by a high-pitched whine that seemed to come from within. Her hand gripped Ryan Quinn's arm, his concerned face the last thing she saw before the world twisted and spun. The quantum core in her time machine, energy depleted, was pulling her back to 2025. She'd known this moment was coming. 5 days, 120 hours was all the prototype allowed. But as her consciousness slipped, a single thought anchored her. Did I save Eric? Did I break free? Ryan, she whispered, her voice fading. Take care of my brother. Then everything went black. When Ellen opened her eyes, the sharp scent of disinfectant filled the air. She was in a hospital room, sunlight streaming through a window, the Seattle skyline visible in the distance. The Space Needle stood tall, a familiar beacon, but the room was modern, sleek 2025. Her heart raced as she sat up, her body weak but whole. The door swung open and Eric Carter strode in his steps, steady, his hazel eyes bright with relief. No wheelchair, no limp, just Eric, healthy and unharmed, his broad shoulders filling the frame of his tailored jacket. Ellen, you're awake, he said, rushing to her bedside, his hand brushing her forehead. You scared me passing out like that. Tears welled in Ellen's eyes, not from pain but from a flood of joy. She'd done it. The accident that had paralyzed Eric in 2023, tied to Vince Harper's shady business deals, had been erased. She reached out, touching his arm and knees, needing to confirm he was whole. Eric, she croaked, her voice hoarse, you're okay. He laughed, confused but warm. Of course I'm okay. You're the one who collapsed. The doc said exhaustion and low blood sugar from pushing yourself on that time project. The time project. Ellen's breath caught. Even in this new timeline, she pursued her time machine research, perhaps for different reasons. In her original timeline, grief over Eric's accident and Vince's betrayal had driven her to build the prototype. Now, with Eric safe, her motivation might be pure curiosity, a scientist's drive to explore the unknown. She sank back against the pillows, relief washing over her. How long was I out? She asked. Eric said a day and a night, handing her a cup of water. Ryan stayed with you the whole time. I finally got him to go home and rest. He said to call him the second you woke up. Ellen's heart warmed at the mention of Ryan, her arranged fiancé, whose steady presence had anchored her through the past 5 days. In her past life, she'd canceled their engagement to chase Vince, losing Ryan to London. Their bond had shifted, built on mutual respect and quiet understanding. Eric's expression turned serious, a smirk tugging at his lips. Who was a mess when you passed out Vince Harper? Ellen's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral. Eric snorted, leaning back in his chair. We cut ties after you roasted him at the graduation party. His company tanked some bad deals, I hear. His dad tried to get our family to bail them out, but Dad shut that down. Vince appeared here all worried, but I had security boot him. You don't still feel anything for him, right? Ellen shook her head, her voice firm. Not a thing. He's nothing to me now. Her words were a vow not just to Eric, but to herself. The party had been her final stand, exposing Vince's relationship with Jane and severing their connection. Eric grinned relief clear in his eyes. Good, that guy was a snake. Thank God you saw through him. After her discharge, Ellen returned to her penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, a sleek space she'd bought with earnings from her tech company, Carter Innovations. In this timeline, without the 10 years lost to Vince, she'd poured her energy into her passion AI and biotech, building a company that rivaled her family's empire. Eric had taken over the Carter conglomerate, expanding it into international markets with a savvy that made her proud. He'd shared stories of his new life, leading global acquisitions, mentoring young entrepreneurs, even coaching a youth soccer team on weekends. You kept me safe, Elle, he'd said, his voice soft. I don't know how, but I owe you. As for Jane Miller, word reached Ellen that she'd taken a substantial payout from Vince's failing company and vanished, leaving him to face the fallout alone. Some said she'd moved to New York chasing a new life. Others whispered she'd burned through the money and faded into obscurity. Either way, Jane's arc was closed, and her manipulation was no match for Ellen's resolve. Ryan picked Ellen up from her office one evening, his car parked among the gleaming towers of Seattle's tech district. He opened the door for her, his smile warm but unassuming. What's for dinner? He asked, his voice relaxed. Ellen leaned back in the seat, her heart light. You decide, she said, savoring the ease of their connection. Their engagement, renewed in this timeline, was a partnership of equals built on respect, not obligation. They'd watched sunsets over the Puget Sound, discussed algorithms and ambitions, and traveled to conferences together. There were no wild sparks, but a steady warmth, a foundation she could trust. Vince tried again, a desperate call to Ryan's phone as they drove. Ellen is mine, he ranted, his voice shrill. Ellen cut in, her tone final. We're done, Vince. Please don't contact us again. Ryan ended the call, his hand finding hers, his touch a quiet strength. Over time, Ellen heard Vince's company had gone bankrupt and ruined his reputation. Some said he'd fled Seattle buried in debt. Others claimed he'd broken down, institutionalized. It didn't matter, he was gone from her life. Ellen's time project continued, no longer driven by grief, but by curiosity. Her company thrived, pushing boundaries in AI and biotech, earning her accolades in the tech world. With Eric leading the family business and Ryan by her side, Ellen's life was complete, calm, purposeful, free. As she looked out at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle glowing against the night, she knew this was the life she'd fought for. The past was behind her, and a new chapter rich with possibility had begun.